My father owed a debt he could not pay, so he paid it with me. He sent me to tend the household of a man the village calls cursed, a man no servant will approach, a man who has not left his estate in 11 years, a man the county whispers about over their suppers and their prayers. They told me he was dying. They told me he was dangerous. They did not tell me that when I touched him, the thing that was killing him would stop. By the time they came to take me back, I was the only thing standing between the vampire king and the darkness that had been consuming him for a century. And I was not leaving. The iron gates were cold under my palms. Not the cold of an autumn evening, though it was that too. The sky behind me had gone the color of a bruise, and the last of the light was bleeding out of it fast. This was a deeper cold, the kind that lives in metal that has not been touched warmly in a very long time. I heard my father's cart already turning back down the road. He had not waited. He had not said goodbye. He had handed me my mother's wooden case, kept his eyes on the horse's ears, and clicked his tongue. The wheels had crunched away over the gravel before I reached the gate. I did not watch him go. I pressed my palms flat against the iron and looked at the house instead. It was vast, dark, the kind of house that had been built to impress and had long since stopped caring whether it succeeded. The stonework was magnificent and crumbling at once, gargoyles missing their faces, ivy pulling at the mortar with patient, destructive fingers. 2 windows on the ground floor held light. Everything else was black. I picked up my case. The leather strap was worn smooth where my mother's hand had held it before mine. I could smell the herbs inside even through the wood. Chamomile, dried valerian, the faint sharp edge of wormwood. My hands smelled of lavender from the morning's work. They were rough hands, stained at the knuckles, not the hands of someone who had been sent here as a kindness. I walked to the door. Mrs. Harrow opened it before I knocked. She was a solid woman, not large but settled, the way old furniture is settled, as though she had decided long ago exactly where she belonged and had not moved since. Her eyes went to my face for 1 second, then to the wooden case, then to my hands. "You are the herbalist's daughter," she said. "I am." "Good." She stepped back from the door. "The physicians were useless." She turned and walked inside. I followed because there was nowhere else to go. The house swallowed me. That is the only word for it. One moment I was on the threshold with the cold evening at my back, and then the door closed and the dark closed with it, and the Vane Estate settled around me like something that had been waiting. Mrs. Harrow moved through it without a candle, which told me everything about how long she had lived here. I kept close behind her, my case knocking gently against my hip, my eyes adjusting slowly to the low burn of the wall sconces. Dust lay on every surface, not the dust of neglect exactly, but the dust of avoidance. The floors were swept, the curtains were straight, but the side tables, the bookshelves, the frames of the portraits lining the corridor, all of it wore a thin gray coat, as though the cleaning had been done carefully around things rather than to them. We stopped at a door at the end of the east corridor. It was heavier than the others, older. The wood had gone almost black with age, and the iron handle was the same cold as the gate had been. "He has not left that room in 11 years, Mrs. Harrow said. Her voice was the same as it had been at the door, dry, factual, a woman reporting weather. The last physician who examined him left within the hour and refused to return. Dr. Pemberton declared the case untreatable and has not been back since." She paused. "The servants will not cross this threshold." She held out a candle. "I will be in the kitchen when you are finished." Not if, when. I took the candle. I looked at the door. I pressed my free hand flat against the wood, the way I had pressed it against the gate, feeling for what was on the other side. The cold came through it like a held breath. Not the cold of a room without a fire. Not the cold of stone and winter. This was the cold of something that had been dying for a very long time, slow and deep and patient, the way a glacier is patient, grinding everything beneath it down to nothing, without any hurry at all. I pushed the door open and went in. He was in the bed, four-poster, dark wood, curtains drawn on three sides. The fourth was open toward the window, and the last gray light of evening came through the glass in a thin, flat sheet. Whoever lay there had been watching that same view for years. I had the feeling they had stopped seeing it long ago. I raised the candle. The light reached him. He was pale, not the pale of illness alone, though that was there too, carved into the hollows of his face and the sharp line of his jaw. This was the pale of something that was never meant to be this still. His hands rested on the coverlet, long-fingered, motionless. His eyes were closed. He looked like a man who had been arranged. The shadows in the room were wrong. I noticed it the way I notice when a plant is wrong. Not a single dramatic sign, but a collection of small ones that add up to something I cannot ignore. The shadows were too thick, too slow. They moved without the candle's flicker to explain them, pressing inward from the walls and the corners, gathering toward the bed with the quiet, deliberate patience of something feeding. I set the candle on the nightstand. I opened my mother's case. The smell of the herbs rose up. Familiar, steady, the closest thing I had to comfort. I sorted through the contents by touch, the way she had taught me, the way my hands knew without my eyes. Then I reached for his wrist to take his pulse. The moment my fingers touched his skin, my hands lit up. Not fire, not the yellow flicker of the candle. A warm gold glow that started deep in my palms and spread outward to every fingertip, steady and certain, like something that had been waiting inside me for exactly this moment and had simply been patient until it arrived. The shadows recoiled. They pulled back from the bed, from the walls, from the corners, fast and silent, like a tide going out. The cold in the room retreated with them. Not gone, but pushed back, held. His eyes opened. Amber. Burning. Looking directly at me. I had been told he was dangerous. I had been told the village feared him. I had been told, in the careful, omitting way my Aunt Agatha told things, that the Vane Estate was no place for a girl like me. I had not been told about his eyes. The servants called him the Vampire King, in whispers over their supper. Half reverence, half the nervous laughter of people who live alongside something they cannot explain. I had dismissed it. Looking at those eyes now, I revised every dismissal I had ever made. I had not been told about the black veins beneath his skin, the ones I could see now, threading up from his wrist toward his forearm, slowly, impossibly, beginning to fade where my fingers rested. "Who are you?" His voice was barely a sound, cracked from disuse, rough at the edges, like a door that had not been opened in years. "The herbalist's daughter," I said. My own voice came out steadier than I expected. "I was sent to tend the house." His amber eyes moved to my hands, to the gold light, to the 3 feet of empty shadow around us where the darkness had pulled back and not returned. You are not tending the house. I looked down at my hands, at the glow that had not stopped, at the black veins fading under my fingertips like ink washing out of cloth. My breath caught. My knees wanted to fold. I locked them. I kept my hands exactly where they were. Soren closed his eyes. His breathing changed. Slowly. The shallow, labored pull of a man who had been fighting for air for 11 years began, impossibly, measurably, to deepen, to steady. The gold light in my palms pulsed once, warm and certain, and the feeling that moved through me with it was not fear. It was recognition. This was mine. Whatever this was, this light, this gift my mother had carried and never named, it was mine. And somewhere down the road, in a house full of careful omissions and letters she had not yet sent, my Aunt Agatha did not know I had found it. The morning came in gray and cold through the kitchen windows, the kind of light that doesn't so much arrive as seep. I had been up since before it. My mother's case was open on the work table, and I was grinding dried valerian root with the small stone pestle I kept in the inner pocket, the one worn smooth on one side from years of my mother's thumb, and now mine. The smell rose up sharp and earthy, grounding, the way it always did. My hands moved without my telling them to. They were still warm. Not the warmth of the kitchen fire, which had burned down to embers and needed tending. This was the warmth from inside, a low, steady pulse at the center of each palm, the same gold heat that had lit the east wing the night before and pushed the shadows back like a tide. In the gray morning light, it was barely visible. Just a faint amber tinge at the fingertips, the way iron looks when it has been near a flame and is cooling but not yet cold. I pressed my thumb into the pestle and kept grinding. I heard Mrs. Harrow before I saw her, the particular rhythm of her footsteps, unhurried and deliberate, the walk of a woman who had covered these floors 10,000 times and saw no reason to rush. She came through the kitchen door, looked at me, looked at my hands, and said nothing about the glow. She set a cup of tea in front of me. "He slept through the night," she said. Her voice was the same as it always was, dry, factual, a woman reporting the weather. "He has not slept through the night in 6 years." I set the pestle down. I wrapped both hands around the cup. The warmth of the ceramic met the warmth already in my palms, and for a moment the two things were indistinguishable from each other. "Whatever you did," Mrs. Harrow said, "do it again." I do not know what I did. Oh, what c'est-on? She looked at me then. A long look, the kind that takes inventory. Her expression was not readable, not quite. It sat somewhere between recognition and restraint, the face of a woman who knows more than she is saying and has decided, for the moment, to say only part of it. "Your mother did not know either," she said. "At first." She turned and walked out. I sat with the cup between my glowing hands and did not move for a long time. The valerian dust settled on the work table. The embers ticked in the grate. Outside, the gray light pressed flat against the glass. "Your mother did not know either." I picked up the pestle. I kept grinding, but my hands were shaking now, and it had nothing to do with the cold. Days passed. I treated him every evening. My hands on his wrists, his temples, the place above his heart, where the curse had concentrated itself like a bruise that went all the way to the bone. The gold light came every time, reliable as a heartbeat, and every time the shadows pulled back a little further from the walls. By the 5th day, color had returned to his face. Not much. He was still pale in the way that things which have been pale for a very long time are pale, structurally, as though the pallor had become architectural. But there was something beneath it now, something that had not been there before. By the 7th day, he sat up. I was measuring dried wormwood into a small cloth pouch when it happened. I heard the shift of weight, the quiet sound of the coverlet moving, and I looked up and he was upright against the headboard, watching me with those amber eyes that caught the candlelight and held it. I did not make a sound. I set the wormwood down carefully. By the 10th day, he spoke in full sentences. His voice was rough at the edges, careful in the middle. The voice of a man relearning the shape of language after years of silence, testing each word before he committed to it. He asked me about the herbs first, what the wormwood was for, why I kept the valerian separate from the chamomile, whether the notebook I carried was my own writing or someone else's. My mother's, I said. I was kneeling beside the bed, my hands resting on his forearm, where the black veins had retreated past the wrist now, past the pulse point, almost to the elbow. The gold light moved between us, steady and warm. She left it to me when she died. I was 7. I have been adding to it since. What did she write about? Remedies, dosages, notes on what worked and what did not. I paused. She wrote about the plants the way other people write about people, as though they had personalities. He was quiet for a moment. The fire in the grate, which had lit itself 3 days ago without any help from me, which Mrs. Harrow had observed without surprise, threw warm shadows across the ceiling. Did she write about the light? He asked. My hands stilled on his arm. The gold pulse continued without me. No, I said. He did not push. He simply listened, with the absolute patient attention of something that has had nothing to listen to for 11 years and has decided, carefully and completely, that my voice is the thing worth hearing. I had never been listened to like that before. Not by my father, who heard only what he needed to hear. Not by my aunt, who heard only what she wanted to manage. Not by anyone. I kept talking. I did not mean to. The words came out the way the light came out, without my full permission, from somewhere I had not known was full. Mrs. Harrow appeared in the doorway that evening with a tray and looked at the two of us. Him sitting up, me kneeling beside him, the gold light warm between our hands, and said, without ceremony, "The house knows when he is better. It has been waiting." She set the tray down. She left. The candles in the room burned 3 shades brighter than they had any right to. On the 12th evening, he was in the armchair. I stood in the doorway of the east wing for a moment before I entered, because I needed that moment. He was sitting upright in the high-backed chair beside the hearth, a man in his own room for the first time in years, and the sight of it did something to my chest that I did not have a name for. He was still thin, still pale, still marked by 11 years of a darkness that had been eating him from the inside, still a vampire, still ancient, still the thing the county feared. But he was upright. He was present. His amber eyes found me the instant I crossed the threshold, the way they always did, as though I carried a frequency only he could hear. I crossed the room. I knelt beside the chair. I opened my mother's case on the floor beside me, sorted through the contents by touch, chamomile, valerian, the small jar of compound salve I had made 3 days ago, and then I rested my hands on his forearm. The gold light came immediately, warm and certain and mine. The black veins had retreated past his elbows now. I could see the line of them clearly in the firelight, the boundary between the curse and the healing, moving slowly, measurably, back toward wherever it had come from. His skin above the line was cool and pale and still. Below it, where my hands rested, it was almost warm. He looked at my hands for a long moment. Then he said, "You should know what I am." "I know what you are," I said. I kept my eyes on the black veins, on the work. "You are a vampire. Mrs. Harrow exercises admirable discretion. The servants do not." Something moved across his face. It was not quite a smile. The expression was wrong for that, unpracticed, like a muscle that had not been used in a decade trying to remember its function. But it was the closest thing to one I had seen on him, and it changed his face entirely, and I made myself look back at his arm. "And you stayed," he said. "I was sent to tend the house." He looked at my glowing hands on his forearm. The firelight moved between us. The shadows in the room, the ones that had once pressed inward from every corner with the patient hunger of something feeding, held their distance now, pushed back to the edges, held there by the gold light and something else I could not name. "You are not tending the house," he said. The same words as the first night, but different now. Everything was different now. The first night he had said it like a man noting a fact from very far away, from behind 11 years of glass. Now he said it like a man who was here, who was present, who was looking at me with amber eyes that had stopped being distant and started being something I did not have a word for yet. My breath caught. I did not pull away. The gold light pulsed, once warm and deep the way it did when the healing was working at its strongest, and his hand turned slowly beneath mine, and his fingers closed, carefully, around my wrist, not restraining, not demanding, just there. The way a man holds something he is not certain he is allowed to hold. The black veins at his elbow faded another half-inch. I stayed exactly where I was, and somewhere down the road, in a house full of careful omissions and things she had spent 20 years concealing, my Aunt Agatha's pen was moving across paper, and the letter she was writing was not polite anymore. Mrs. Harrow found me in the herb garden the next morning. Her expression was the flat, controlled mask she wore when she was holding something back, not concealing it, containing it, the way you contain a fire by choosing which doors to close. "There is a carriage at the gate," she said. "A Lady Agatha Calloway. She says she is your aunt." My hands went still in the soil. "She has a letter from your father," Mrs. Harrow said. "She says the arrangement is terminated. You are to return home immediately." I stood. The dirt fell from my fingers. The gold warmth in my palms was still there, faint, steady, the residual pulse that had not fully faded since last night's treatment. "The arrangement is not terminated," I said. "He is getting better." Mrs. Harrow looked at me. The contained expression shifted, not softened, sharpened. The expression of a woman who has been waiting for a particular kind of answer and has just heard it. "I know," she said. "That is why she is here." Lady Agatha was in the drawing room. She did not rise when I entered. She sat in the high-backed chair near the cold hearth, with the posture of a woman who has been sitting in other people's chairs her entire life and has never once felt like a guest. Gray silk, immaculate gloves. A face I had not seen in 14 years, but recognized immediately. My mother's face rearranged into something harder, the same bones under different management. She looked at my hands, at the soil under the nails, at the faint gold warmth that had not fully faded. She looked at them the way you look at evidence you hoped would not exist. "You will pack your things," she said. "You will leave with me tonight. Your father has agreed." "My father sent me here to settle his debt. The debt is settled. Your service is no longer required." "He is not healed." Lady Agatha's voice dropped. The silk tightened over the steel beneath it. She leaned forward, not far, just enough that the candlelight caught the lines around her mouth, the architecture of 20 years of careful control. "What you are doing to that man is not healing," she said. "It is something else, something your mother carried, something I have spent 20 years ensuring no one discovers." She paused. "You will stop. You will come with me. And you will never touch him again." My hands were shaking. The gold was rising in my palms without my permission. Not the steady pulse of healing, but something brighter, fiercer, the response of a gift that has just been told it should not exist. I pressed them flat against my skirts. What was my mother? Lady Agatha stood. Her composure was absolute. Every seam sealed, every fracture pressed shut. "Your mother was a mistake," she said. "You do not have to be one." She walked out. My knees buckled. I caught the doorframe. I held on. That evening I was not allowed to see him. Lady Agatha posted a footman at the east wing door. Gerald, the young one. The one who flinched when shadows moved. Mrs. Harrow found me in the kitchen. She set a cup of tea in front of me and waited until I had wrapped both hands around it. "Gerald," she said, "owes me 11 years of overlooked infractions. Gerald is no longer at the door." I ran. The east wing was cold, colder than it had been in days, the shadows pressing back in from the corners, the black veins visible again past his wrists. His breathing labored in the dark. One missed evening, one night without my hands on his skin, and the curse had surged back like a tide that had only been waiting for the barrier to drop. I knelt beside the bed. I placed my hands on his chest. The gold light poured out of me, stronger than before, fiercer, as though the interruption had made it angry. The shadows screamed backward. His eyes opened, amber, dim. But there. "They are taking you away," he said. "No. Your aunt. No." One word, the most important word I had ever spoken. My hands pressed harder against his chest. The gold blazed. His breathing steadied. His eyes found mine. I was crying. I did not decide to cry. My hands were steady. My voice was steady. Only my eyes had broken rank, and I let them, because some things you cannot hold and should not try to. Lady Agatha's voice came from the doorway. "Step away from him." I did not move. Behind her, my father. He would not meet my eyes. He had never met my eyes. Lady Agatha stepped forward. She reached for my arm. The shadows in the room moved. Lady Agatha's hand was still suspended in the air, 3 inches from my arm, 3 inches from completing a motion she had crossed a county to make. Her fingers were perfectly still, not trembling, not retreating, simply stopped, the way a clock stops when something essential inside it breaks. The shadows held their wall between us. I watched her face. I watched the fracture in it, that single crack running from the corner of her eye to the line of her jaw, and I understood, with a clarity that felt like cold water, that she had never once considered the possibility that she would fail. She had come here with my father's letter and her gray silk composure and 20 years of careful management, and she had expected to collect a girl. She was looking at something that had stopped being a girl the moment it walked through an iron gate and pressed its palms flat against the cold and chose to go forward anyway. Agatha. The voice came from the bed, not loud, not commanding. The voice of a man who had been silent for 11 years and had learned, in that silence, that volume is not the same as authority. Soren's amber eyes were fixed on her face. His hands rested on the coverlet. Still, deliberate. The hands of a man who was choosing not to move and wanted her to understand that the choice was entirely his. "You knew her mother," he said. Lady Agatha's suspended hand came down, slowly, to her side. "I knew what her mother was," she said. The composure was back, almost. The fracture was still there, but she had pressed it closed with both hands, the way you press a wound. A liability, a danger to herself and to anyone "You knew her mother," he said again. The same words, the same tone, patient and absolute, the way the shadows at the wall were patient and absolute. "And you buried what she was, and you let her daughter be sent here as a debt payment." He paused. Each word after that was precise, deliberate. "You knew what she would find." The silence that followed was the loudest thing I had ever heard. Lady Agatha's mouth opened, closed. The composure cracked again, wider this time, the fracture running deeper, and beneath it I saw the thing she had been pressing down for 20 years. The thing that was not management, and was not strategy, and was not the careful, constructed face of a woman who has decided to be in control of everything. It was guilt, old guilt, structural guilt. The kind that has been load-bearing for so long that the person carrying it has forgotten there was ever a time they put it down. "I was protecting her," she said. Her voice had changed. The silk was gone from it. What was underneath was smaller and older and not composed at all. "I was protecting both of them. Your kind—" She stopped, started again. "What happened to her mother is not happening here." 3 words. The amber eyes did not move from her face. "You do not know that." "I know," he said, "that she came into this room 14 days ago and put her hand on a dying man and did not flinch." His voice was still quiet, still deliberate, but something had entered it. Something warm and certain, the same quality as the gold light, the same quality as the pulse I felt in my palms every time I touched him. I know that every evening since she has come back, not because she was sent, not because she was afraid, because she chose to. He looked at me then. Just for a moment. Just long enough for the amber to find my face and hold it. "You cannot bury that. You tried for 14 years. You failed." Lady Agatha looked at me. I looked back at her. I had spent the last 14 days learning what my hands could do. I had spent the last 14 days learning that the thing my mother had carried, the thing Agatha had called a mistake, a liability, a danger, was not any of those things. It was a gift. It was mine. And it had been mine all along, waiting in my palms like a held breath, patient as a glacier, waiting for the moment I would stop being afraid of it and simply use it. I was not afraid of it anymore. "You should go," I said. My voice came out the way it had come out that first night, steadier than I expected, steadier than I felt. But the feeling underneath the steadiness was not the white-knuckled grip of someone holding themselves together. It was something quieter, something that had found its footing. Lady Agatha looked at me for a long moment. The guilt in her face was still there, old and structural and load-bearing. But something else had entered it, something I had not expected to see there, and did not have a name for, and did not need to name. She looked at my hands, at the gold light, still warm in my palms, still moving between my fingers in that steady amber pulse. She looked at the shadows holding their wall between us. She looked at the man in the bed, whose amber eyes had not left her face, whose hands were still and deliberate on the coverlet, who was not threatening her and did not need to. She turned. She walked to the door. She stopped in the doorway, her back to the room, her gray silk perfectly straight, her hands at her sides. "She looked like her," she said, quietly, to no one, to the doorframe, to the 20 years of careful management that had just come apart in a room full of gold light and shadows that chose sides. "Your mother, when she was..." She looked exactly like her. She walked out. My father had not moved from the doorway. He was still standing where he had been standing since he arrived, slightly behind Lady Agatha, slightly to the left, the position of a man who has spent his life letting other people stand in front of him and take up space he did not know how to claim. His eyes were on the floor. They had been on the floor since he arrived. I looked at him. He was smaller than I remembered. Not in height, in the other way. The way people are smaller when you have been away from them long enough to stop seeing them through the eyes of someone who needed them to be large. "Father," I said. He looked up. His eyes found my face for the first time since he had handed me my mother's case and clicked his tongue at the horse and let the wheels crunch away over the gravel without a word. I did not say anything else. There was nothing else to say that would not be either too much or not enough, and I had learned, in 14 days of kneeling beside a man who listened with absolute attention, that silence can be its own kind of sentence. He looked at my hands, at the gold light, at the man in the bed. He looked at me. Something moved across his face. Not the guilt Lady Agatha carried, not the old structural kind. Something newer. Raw. The look of a man who has just understood, too late, the precise weight of what he put down. He turned and walked out. The east wing door closed behind him. The sound of it was very small. The shadows settled, not the hungry pressing inward of the darkness that had been feeding on Soren for 11 years. The other kind. The ordinary kind. The warm, fire-lit shadows of a room with a hearth and a candle and 2 people in it. They retreated to the walls and the corners where shadows belong and stayed there, quiet and domestic. The shadows of a room that has decided it is done with extraordinary things for the evening. I became aware slowly that I was still kneeling beside the bed. My hands were still on his chest. The gold light was still moving between my fingers, but it had changed. The fierce, blazing flood of it had settled back into the steady, warm pulse I knew, the reliable heartbeat of something that was working and did not need to fight anymore. The black veins at his wrists had retreated past the pulse point, past the forearm. I could see the line of them clearly in the firelight, further back than they had been before Lady Agatha arrived, further back than they had been before the mist evening, further back than they had been at any point in the 14 days, as though the crisis had burned something away, as though the darkness had overextended itself and paid for it. I let out a breath I had been holding since the garden path. "She was afraid of you," Soren said. "She was afraid of what I am." "Yes." His voice was quiet, thoughtful, the voice of a man turning something over carefully, examining it from all sides. People often are, of things they cannot manage. I looked up at him. His amber eyes were on the ceiling, not distant, not the 11 years of glass look I had first seen there, present, thinking. "What happened to my mother?" I asked. He was quiet for a moment. "I did not know her," he said. "I have been the vampire king of this valley for nearly 5 centuries, and I did not know her. But I know what your aunt feared. She feared that your mother loved something the county could not forgive her for loving, and that the loving of it cost her." He paused. "I do not think the loving was the cost. I think the hiding was." My hands were still on his chest. The gold light moved between us, steady and warm and entirely unhurried. "She left me the case," I said. "She left me the notebook. She left me the hands." I stopped. "She left me everything except the explanation." "She left you the most important thing," he said. He looked at me then, the amber eyes coming down from the ceiling to find my face, the way they always did, the way they had done since the first night. "She left you the choice of what to do with it." I looked at his hand, the one resting on the coverlet, still and deliberate, the same hand that had closed around my wrist on the 12th evening, the same hand that had covered mine on his chest when Lady Agatha reached for me. "You said I stay," I said. "What does that mean, in this house, to you?" He was quiet. The amber eyes held mine. The fire moved between us. "It means," he said, "that I am asking you to remain, not as a servant, not as a healer, not as a debt." He paused. The effort of the next words was visible in his jaw. Not physical effort. The effort of a man who has not asked for anything in 11 years and is discovering that the asking is harder than the silence. "As my wife, if you will have something the entire county fears." My hands were still on his chest. The gold light pulsed once, warm, deep, certain. "The entire county," I said, "has never touched you. I have." He did not smile, but the muscle tried, and this time it almost succeeded. Mrs. Harrow appeared in the doorway at some point. I did not hear her coming, which meant she had not wanted me to. She stood there for a moment with a tray and looked at the room. The settled shadows, the warm firelight, the gold glow moving quietly between my hands and the man who was measurably and undeniably getting better. She set the tray on the nightstand. She looked at me. "The carriage has gone," she said. Her voice was the same as it always was, dry, factual, weather. "Both of them." I nodded. She looked at my hands, at the faint amber warmth at the fingertips, the steady pulse at the center of each palm. "Your room has been made up properly," she said. "Not the servants' room, the one on the 2nd floor, east side, the one with the garden view." She turned to go. "Mrs. Harrow." She stopped. "You knew my mother." It was not a question. I had known it since the morning in the kitchen, since your mother did not know either at first, since the long look that carried weight it did not put down. She was quiet for a moment. Her back was to me. Her shoulders were the shoulders of a woman who has been carrying something for a long time and has just been asked to set it on the table. I served her, she said, before I served here, before everything. She paused. She was the bravest person I have ever known, and the loneliest. Another pause. Shorter. You are braver. You will not be as lonely. She walked out. The fire in the grate burned 3 shades brighter than it had any right to. The herb garden, 3 weeks later, was something my mother would have recognized. The beds were clear. The useful plants were sorted from the ornamental ones. The chamomile from the wormwood. The lavender in long gray-green rows along the south wall where the light was best. The soil was dark and turned and smelled the way good soil smells. Alive, patient, full of things that were becoming other things. I was on my knees between the valerian and the sage when I heard footsteps on the garden path. Not Mrs. Harrow's footsteps. Different, slower. The careful, deliberate steps of a man relearning the weight of his own body in open air, testing each footfall, not from weakness, but from the particular attention of someone who has been given something back and is not taking it for granted. I did not look up immediately. I kept my hands in the soil. I felt the warmth in my palms, the steady amber pulse, always there now, as natural as a heartbeat, as much mine as my mother's notebook or the worn, smooth pestle or the stained knuckles that had never been the hands of someone sent here as a kindness and had always been the hands of someone who chose to stay. The footsteps stopped beside me. I looked up. Soren stood at the edge of the lavender bed, his amber eyes on the garden, on the cleared beds, the sorted plants, the dark turned soil, with the expression of a man seeing something he had stopped believing was possible and is recalibrating, carefully, what possible means. He was pale. He was still thin. He was still marked by 11 years of a darkness that had eaten him from the inside, and the healing was not finished, and would not be finished for some time yet. He was outside. For the first time in 11 years, he was outside, and the morning light was on his face and his amber eyes were alive with it. He looked down at me. "The valerian," he said. His voice was rough at the edges still, careful in the middle, but stronger than it had been. "You keep it separate from the chamomile." "They argue," I said. "The valerian is aggressive. The chamomile is too gentle to defend itself." Something moved across his face. The expression that was not quite a smile but was the closest thing to one. The unpracticed muscle, the decade of disuse. And this time it completed itself. This time it arrived. It changed his face entirely. I looked back at the soil. My hands were warm. The garden smelled of lavender and turned earth, and the faint sharp edge of wormwood, and the morning light was coming in low and gold over the south wall. And somewhere in the house behind us, Mrs. Harrow was making tea with the particular unhurried rhythm of a woman who has decided that things are, at last, as they should be. He sat down on the low stone border of the bed, not gracefully, not with the ease of a man who has been doing this, with the careful, deliberate motion of a man who is choosing be here, in this specific place, beside this specific person, in the morning light. He did not speak. Neither did I. The gold warmth moved in my palms, steady and unhurried, and the garden grew around us in the patient way that gardens grow, not dramatically, not all at once, but continuously, and without any doubt at all that it will. I was sent as payment. I stayed as choice. That is the difference between a debt and a life, and it is the only difference that has ever mattered. If this story moved you, if you've ever been told that what you carry is a liability and discovered it was a gift, leave a comment below. Tell me what you would have done at that door. Subscribe for more stories like this. New tales of quiet courage and the things that heal us when we stop being afraid of them.